Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu unseren Inspiring Conversation. Mein Name ist Christiane Schulz, ich bin CEO von Weber Shandwick in Deutschland und ich freue mich wirklich sehr, heute hier bei mir zu haben Vivian Schiller. Sie ist unser Global Editor-in-Chief und was so spannend an Vivian ist, dass sie eben für Firmen schon gearbeitet hat wie die New York Times, CNN, NBC News und Twitter und noch viele mehr. Wir werden heute über die Trends, die uns in der Medienlandschaft bewegen, sprechen und dazu werden wir vor allem fokussieren auf Plattformen, auf Publisher und auf Branded Content. Und wir steigen gleich ein in die Plattform. Vivian, so here we are on Facebook, Facebook Live, and this is definitely one of the platforms to be on, I believe. But
certainly is.
What if we look at trends in context of platforms in 2017? What do you think is important for big brands and companies out there? What should they be aware or expecting or look out for?
Right. Well, first of all, hi everybody. Thank you. It's great to be here, and apologies that I don't speak German, but I'm glad to be talking about these issues today. And yeah, it's perhaps ironic or no coincidence that we're having this conversation on Facebook because, of course, it is the dominant global platform in 2017, as it has been for quite a number of years now, with almost 1.8 billion monthly active users. So, let's talk a little bit about Facebook and what some of the other strong platforms are doing, and then maybe we'll look at what some of the emerging platforms I assume we're going to talk about as well. What I see for Facebook, which is relevant to users as well as to brands, is the fact that Facebook is going to continue to move in the direction that it has been moving in, which is to find more and more reasons to keep people on the platform, to create experiences where somebody doesn't necessarily want to click away from Facebook to go to another site, but rather they can have that entire experience on Facebook. So you see that with more and more video on Facebook. You see that with instant articles where you have that entire experience. To maintain it as a closed garden, driven by algorithms. On the other hand, you have Google, which is sort of the champion of the open web, and and because their business is predicated on it, to make sure that there are experiences like AMP articles and other experiences that make it a very seamless experience on the open web. So for brands, of course, it's important to understand both and to understand how to play in both of those environments.
Okay, so looking at Facebook, you just mentioned it's a closed platform. So as a brand, how do I truly reach new target audience? How do I get to the target group?
Right. Well, first, it's really important to understand the fundamental driving factors behind the algorithms. The algorithms on Facebook determines what you actually see in your news feed. So all of us see very different experiences, and we don't see all of the content from everybody that we're friends with. What shows up in each individual's news feed is content that is based on a lot of signals. And of course, Facebook doesn't publish what the algorithm is, so we can't know what it is exactly. But they did last summer publish the principles around those algorithms, and it is absolutely what shows up in the news feed is based on signals about what I as a user have engaged with in the past, which means I've liked something, commented on it, shared it, and what the people who I have the most connections, the closest Facebook ties to, what they are engaging with, again, liking, commenting, and sharing. So what you see is what the people closest to you and what you already show that you like. It is not, as many people believe, based on how many clicks you have on your company page. I see that's sort of a vanity metric in a way, is how many likes I have on my page. It doesn't necessarily drive what's going to show up in users' feeds. So in order to penetrate and to get that engagement going, and then hopefully you have that flywheel effect, you need to put some paid support behind Facebook in order to be effective. We've seen this over and over again. Facebook has, because they have such a large audience and they have so much information about us, because we give that information as part of our Facebook experience, there's great targeting capabilities. I mean, you can target people so specifically by gender, age, location, interest, implied income, all kinds of ways. So you can really reach that target audience. And if your content is engaging, it will then get some momentum from those audiences. But it's very hard. It's like lightning in a bottle to have something that succeeds without a paid push.
So, but the question is, there are some companies who might say, or even clients who might say, well, Facebook might not be something for me, or my company, or my brand. What would you say in that context?
I would say that I can't think of any audience that can't be found on Facebook. Again, 1.8 billion monthly active users. Just because what you see, I mean, it's very, we often turn to our own experiences. So when I go on my feed, I see my nephews, baby pictures of my nephew's twin babies, and I see some funny memes from my, college roommates. And I do see news stories, but news stories from news organizations that I like, and some brand messages. So don't confuse what is in your news feed to what the people that you can reach through targeting. It's very, very powerful.
Okay, so now talking about Facebook, let's look at other platforms that you think are of interest. What about Twitter? I mean, there's always a discussion about Twitter.
Yeah.
Are they going to make it?
Right.
What do you think?
Yeah. Well, Twitter's a bit of a paradox in the sense of as a platform, it's never been more vibrant. It is really, as far as I'm concerned, the only source for news, for up-to-the-minute news, because it is not filtered, mostly not filtered by an algorithm. It's real time. You're seeing the tweets from everybody you follow moving through, and particularly in these very busy news days, with so much news around us, it's really the only platform for that. On the other hand, they've really struggled, really from the beginning, to figure out the right strategy for monetization. Their user growth has stalled to a certain extent. Revenue growth and user growth is pretty small. But it's still about 300 million monthly active users. So, that's still a significant number, and it also is really a centerpiece of conversation around civic life. I mean, you have, the President of the United States tweeting multiple times a day. I mean, a lot of people who want to follow the news are on Twitter, and they're not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what about Snapchat?
Yeah, so Snapchat is interesting. They're preparing for their
IPO?
For their IPO. So we're starting to see, actually, because of that, we're starting to see some more data come out around Snapchat. Snapchat's interesting because it sort of is this. We tend to use this term social media platforms as if they're all the same, but Snapchat is interesting because it's kind of a hybrid between a social media platform and a messaging platform, and we should talk about messaging too, because that's a very interesting trend. So it's got sort of some of the best characteristics of what we're seeing from messaging apps and messaging platforms, yet it has that sort of sharing capability and that and extraordinary creative expression, which is now being frankly replicated by Instagram and Facebook and others. So the big question for Snapchat is, with the pressure of being publicly traded and the disclosures that come along with that, will they deliver the kind of growth that Wall Street wants to see? With other platforms copying a lot of their tools and products, will they remain really popular with millennials and Gen Z like they are today? For brands, the question is it going to be, will they be able to provide the kinds of metrics to brands that help us understand whether our messaging is effective or not? These are all the questions to watch in the next year.
Yeah, and now you said it yourself. It seems like they're copying from each other, like right. Facebook from Snapchat and Instagram and back
right.
and forth. So are they becoming more or less the same, or do you think they can keep something unique, or is one of them you mentioned the Messenger. I mean, Facebook did buy a lot of things to integrate it in their system.
Right, and they're copying. I mean, Snapchat invented certain things that are very popular, like ephemeral media, the message that you send that disappears, and Snapchat stories. Snapchat stories now being copied by Instagram for Instagram stories. Rumors that, Facebook and other platforms will introduce ephemeral media. But right now, Snapchat really has, sort of captured the attention of younger generations, with all of that blending of those platforms to look more and more alike. Will they make it? It's impossible to predict. Certainly wouldn't count them out.
Yeah, but I understand that more or less what you're saying is that still within all these platforms arising and with maybe addressing different kind of target group, Facebook is still the biggest to be.
Right. Well, and like you said, Facebook, the parent company, owns the Facebook product. They own WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Instagram. I mean, these are very, very powerful platforms, each in different ways in their own right.
But with the algorithm, I mean, I'm truly being kept in a bubble. It's like an echo chamber. I hear and read all the things just that I want to read and want to hear. I don't hear what others might have to say. This is actually something that is leading us, in a way or not, a bit to the topic of trusted media and fake news.
Right.
So how do we look at these topics and how do we address them as a company?
Yeah. Well, we talked a few minutes ago about the implications of algorithms in terms of brands reaching targeted audience. The other implication of algorithms and the fact that the algorithm favors content that I like and what my friends like is we end up seeing things that we are predisposed to agree with. And, there's a lot of data about what people's news feeds, the differences in people's news feeds in the run-up to the U.S. elections, and how really many people had very, very different experiences of what kind of news they were seeing, whether it's real news or fake news, and a kind of a polarization of people almost having entirely different realities about which candidate was ahead, who was behind, what their policies were. And we've now that continues to be the case, not just in the United States and many places, and it's sort of eroding, I think, in many ways. This isn't just Facebook's fault. It's an overall trend with a lot of factors in it, but it is sort of eroding what was a universal understanding of what is objective truth, which is pretty terrifying, really, when you think about it. That what that means for a lot of reasons, but it's. But yeah, because of the Facebook algorithms, you do have very, very different experiences. And while fake news is not a new phenomenon, it really has sort of reached, in many ways, has reached a fever pitch and shows no signs of diminishing. The platforms, many of us, the platforms, news organizations, and agencies like ours and working with our brands all feel like we have an important role to play. The platforms are looking, and we can talk about it if you like, certain fixes to try to not necessarily be the arbiters of what's real and fake news, but at least bring in other signals so that people can judge for themselves. News organizations, of course, are trying to fight fake news with real news. But there is a very important role for both agencies and brands to play in this fake news situation. And Weber Shandwick, where we have been out for a while now, trying to take a leadership position in terms of certain principles to make sure that in the work that we do with brands that we're not part of the problem, but more importantly, we try to help find solutions and we help our brands find solutions.
Yeah, I think in general it's very important that the truth is worth something, and I believe it's not just for us as PR agencies, it's for the whole communication industry. I believe for publishers as well, as it goes for platforms that might support spreading news in general.
Yeah, that's right.
So let's look at the trust factor, and maybe at let's move on a bit to the publisher.
Yeah.
I mean, there are studies all over the place that they lost a lot of trust.
Right.
And they also have a challenge with their business models. They need to look for new opportunities. Right. In the latest developments, will we see a rise in trust again? Is there opportunity for it or not?
Well, first of all, trust in news has been declining. This is not a Facebook phenomenon or even a mobile era or internet phenomenon. Trust in journalism has been going down for decades. and it's now at its lowest, as long as it's been measured, we're now at the lowest point so far. There was Reuters Institute for Journalism puts out a global study every year, country by country, that measures through a scientific survey of people's trust in journalism, news organizations, and journalists. And it varies by country. In Germany, it's about 50% of respondents say that they trust the news that they see from professional news organizations. In the US, it's only at 33%. Now, keep in mind that was data that was published last June, reflecting surveys that were done in 2015. Mm-hmm. I would strongly suspect, based on the news cycles over the last year, when we get that data again this coming June for 2016, we will see an additional decline. There is, in many corners, an assault on professional journalism. Journalists, on the other hand, have are reinvigorated in terms of the work that they do. But nonetheless, the business models of traditional news organizations remain very troubled and very shaky. So while we see things like in the United States, there's been a real uptick in digital subscriptions to the New York Times and to the Wall Street Journal, or contributions to places like ProPublica, at the same time, you still have that tension of the business models that makes it hard for news organizations to do what they need to do, which is to hire more reporters, put more boots on the ground all over the United States to cover, the country and the world, and I know it's similar, in every country, to have enough resources to be able to do enough coverage to, cover all the news that's happening in the world, which just feels, in the United States, just the White House alone is generating more news in the last 3 weeks than I've seen in the last year.
Yeah. So let's look at the business model for the publishing houses a bit more, because the traditional, you said they have now a couple of more subscription, which is great, but it won't be lasting in a way. It will not save their problems. Right. So they look at different kind of models to earn money, and I think in that context, one of the things that is declining is own content on their website, right? Yeah. So what would their future look like? Right. What is most promising for them?
Right. So you're absolutely right. Even with the increase in digital subscriptions, it's in most cases it's not enough to offset the declines in traditional display advertising. So news organizations are looking for other forms of revenue. I mean, it's great that digital subscriptions have gone up, but for most, it's simply not enough. And coupled with that, and I think this is what you're getting at with the decline in traffic to websites, as more and more people get their news from social media, particularly millennials, it's incumbent upon publishers to make sure that they are providing a rich news experience to those audiences on the platforms where their audiences are naturally already gathering, and not try to sort of force them into what is, an unnatural behavior, which is to click away from the news feed, and if you're on a mobile phone, to go back to the news organization's website, which, depending on your data plan, can be slow. It can then deliver you some ads, which diminishes the experience, which again slows the load time. So news organizations, in order to remain relevant, have to more and more be on those platforms, but it's much harder for them to make money on those platforms. There's at least still revenue to be had on their native websites, but you've got to fish where the fish are, as they say, where I come from, and probably everywhere. So what are publishers to do? They're looking at other sources of revenue, including, creating their own content for brands and, native ads and other opportunities.
Yeah, and as I understood, or if I understood you right, they also go more into the micro-targeting when it comes to sending out their content to their audiences. So they're looking at very decised distribution models as well. Yeah,
well, they generally try both. I mean, they have sort of the precision targeting, with some products like email newsletters, which feels like a very old-fashioned thing, is actually very successful for engaged audiences, mm-hmm. and bringing them back and back. Alerts, mobile news alerts are also very powerful. But in order to reach younger audiences, and audiences that may not be familiar with their brands, they've got to be everywhere. I mean, another sort of disturbing, if you're a fan of legacy news organizations, is recognition of brands in the news feeds. So millennials, less than 50% of millennials, if they see a story from a news organization in their Facebook feed or someplace else, are able to recall. They may see the story and remember the story, but they can't recall where they got that story from. So that's also concerning for news organizations.
Well, combining maybe the publisher topic with a platform topic, the New York Times did a lot around virtual reality. And if we look at that, virtual reality and video, where is the trend heading there?
Yeah.
Do you think virtual reality will be big, exploding, like they tell us sometimes in the media?
I think there's a tendency for people to get really excited about the next new thing and think that it is going to be the answer to all of our dreams. And in some ways, both in terms of online video and virtual reality, it's not really the case. So let's take virtual reality for a minute and then we can talk about video. Virtual reality is an extraordinary experience. I mean, you can have a fully immersive 360-degree experience that can be informative and moving and again, immersive in a way that we've never been able to experience before. But there's a fundamental problem with virtual reality, which is you're wearing a box on your face. You're completely separated from the rest of the world. It's not something, it's also expensive to produce, and a lot of people don't have the devices. It's not the kind of thing you're going to come back to again and again and again multiple times during the day. So virtual reality, I think, is going to remain strong in certain sectors. Clearly for gaming, it's a phenomenal experience. I think that if I were a gaming company, I would be investing heavily. And for also certain use cases like home shopping, where you can really, how extraordinary to be able to walk through a home without having to, actually drive all over and experience it. But in terms of sort of bread and butter storytelling for news and for brands, I think you really have to ask yourself, is there something about the virtual reality medium that's going to allow me to tell my story in a way that no other platform can? And it really needs to be compelling and unique, otherwise it's a waste of time and money. Video, of course, and I love video. I spent the first 18 years of my career in television. I'm a big believer in moving pictures. But again, there's almost this kind of, almost a meme out there that every story should be told in video. And if you're not doing all video all the time, you're doing something wrong. And that's just not the case. First of all, let's look at you see tremendous, numbers of people, every survey are viewing video online. But a lot of times that is a blend of people who are, streaming Game of Thrones or watching, those little cooking, tasty videos or a clip from, the latest Saturday Night Live skit or other kinds of humors. And those are conflated with, news videos or brand videos or other information videos, which really are not necessarily getting the kind of pickup that as you might imagine, you would get from entertainment. And now there's finally some really good data that's come out that shows that a lot of times, particularly for news and information, people, even millennials, the elusive millennial who again, there's a wrong conventional wisdom that, things have to keep spinning and moving to keep their attention, have said they would, oftentimes rather read something than see the video because it's more efficient. They can get the information they can need. They can, it doesn't use up their data. It's faster, all of those things. So again, just think about what is the story you're trying to tell, and is video the best way to do it?
Well, talking about video, we are on Facebook Live now. What about live communication? When Felix Baumgartner jumped out there and flew down all the way to Earth, we thought that live communication might truly grab a new dimension of communicating with companies, brands, with their target audience. What do you think?
Well, live is incredibly powerful. It's also not new. I mean, we've been watching live sports and live news events, for generations now. And the Felix Baumgarten video was the perfect use of live video because, let's face it, you had no idea what's going to happen. The same thing with the tightrope walkers, going, across the Grand Canyon. But again, not everything should be live. This is, of course, a fantastic use of live video. But you always have to question: when I think about what the way that we work with brands in terms of telling stories with original content, you have to start from the beginning. Who am I trying to reach? What am I trying to? What do I want them to do? What do I want them to feel? How do I want them to act? Where are they naturally gathering? What are they on what platforms? Where are they gathering? What are they saying? What are they experiencing? What is the best way to tell a story on that platform? Only then do you think about, how do I tell that story? Is it a live video, or a produced video? Is it a blog post? Is it a GIF? Is it a VR? What is it? What is the best way? But you need to do those fundamentals first, and doing those analytics and understanding those audiences will lead you to the right path. It might be live video, but very good chance it won't be.
Okay, well, us talking about publisher, you just explaining what is important. Let's move on already to branded content.
Yeah.
If I'm a company, if I'm a brand, we had in the last couple of years, there was a lot about talk about newsroom, copying newsroom, company brand newsroom. So what they usually did is they looked at the publishing houses, how they did it, and then they tried to set it up. What's your point of view? And there's some discussion here as well. Is that successful or not?
Right, yeah. Well, as someone that's worked in newsrooms, run newsrooms, set up newsrooms, I've seen a lot of different newsrooms, and I've seen how newsrooms have had to change, over the years. And so now, I bring that experience to my work with Weber Shandwick and working with our clients and with our brands. And I've seen, I see some mistakes being made, and it's fine to replicate a publisher newsroom, but make sure you're not replicating a publisher newsroom from the way they were doing things 10 years ago. So, for instance, we were just talking about sort of the journey of how you figure out where you're going to publish your branded content. Unfortunately, I see in all too many cases a brand newsroom thinking they're doing the right thing and they're replicating the best practices of publishers. Start by saying, we've got a great story to tell. We're going to tell that story. We're going to write a blog post. We're going to do a video. It's going to be fantastic. Okay, great. It's done. We love it. We're going to put it on our website, our microsite. There it is. We want to drive people to that website. And then all the way at the end of the process, they turn to the social media coordinator and they say, social media coordinator, okay, it's up there. It's good. Just push it out on Twitter and Facebook and, drive those referrals back to the website. And it doesn't work. For a whole number of reasons, because it's the backwards way of approaching how you engage audiences today. The reverse process is the way it should work. It's what we were talking about. Who am I trying to reach? What am I trying to get them to do? Where are they today? What are they talking about on those platforms? Only then, let's craft specific messages, with the right kind of medium for those platforms. Let's optimize it. Let's listen to them. Let's optimize it based on the data we're seeing to effectively engage with a combination of paid and free. And only then, okay, let's also have it on our website. Because on our website, that's an archive. It's a repository of our content. It's also sort of a visual statement of our brand values. So all too often I see, instead of that process, the first process, which is saying, we know the story you want to tell and never mind whether you're prepared to hear it.
Yeah.
The other thing I see with newsrooms is the way that they set up the organizational structure. Again, copying a slightly outdated organizational structure where you have sort of an almighty editor-in-chief and a very hierarchical system below them of assistant editors and copy editors. And I'm a big believer in pristine copy, don't get me wrong, and in quality content. But what's missing from that is, especially if you're a brand newsroom, even if you have a great story to tell, it can't be driven solely by news judgment. It's got to be a combination of who are we trying to, again, sorry if I keep repeating myself, who we're trying to reach, where are they gathering, what do we want them to do, how can we best tell them our story in a way that they find useful, interesting, entertaining, moving, whatever it is. And that, by the way, goes for both a B2C and a B2B
and
brand.
And I think what you say makes totally sense when you sometimes read in our press. Sometimes they're saying there are CMOs who say we do digital, even so we see it doesn't really work. There might be question if it's the right way or not.
Right.
I think that's what you address. Really make sure to know your target audience,
Exactly.
where it is, what it is, and it's more work actually for everybody to look at the channels,
Right.
to look what kind of content or what the content should look like.
Yeah.
Rather than creating one piece of content that you say, I just push it through the
Right.
channels.
Yeah.
And I like to say what we do is called media work, and the word is work, because you need to make it work, and that's really not that it's not difficult, but it's really about, it takes a lot of work to actually do it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good example how you set it up, to say a lot of people are still doing it the wrong way.
Right. If you ever hear somebody say the cliche, create once, publish everywhere, shut them down.
Okay.
You have to create once and again and again and again.
Yeah, and I think that makes it a bit more harder.
Yeah.
But you also need to have really people who really know the platforms and really understand and listen to what is happening there in context with the audience. So I think it also there is an ask to listen more what's out there and to truly look at the target groups.
And I hope we haven't made this sound so daunting that someone will think, oh, that's too much work for me. The payoff is extraordinary. The ability to get that kind of engagement and reach people and activate them around your brand. And further, when we say this is we're a legacy PR company, in order to also gain earned media off the back of your original content, your owned media, to gain earned media off the back of your owned media campaigns. These things work in tandem, and you can really get some great momentum that way. We've seen it over and over again.
Yeah, but as you said earlier, it's like, and I think this is still a discussion that happens a lot, that even within the classical PR, paid media has become so important to really make sure I meet my audience, because otherwise I won't get in these bubbles that are there on platforms like Facebook.
Right.
So any recommendations on terms of media strategy? I mean, it's kind of, it's not new, but it's not really established in PR. What do you think? Is that the engagement officer also who should be aware?
Yes, and thinking about all the tools that he or she has at their disposal. In addition to paid, there's, again, depending on the situation, you can have a powerful reach with influencers. While a lot of discovery is on these social platforms, so-called social platforms, search is also still very important. The idea of integrating all of these disciplines and not keeping them siloed, but activate each of these areas so that they mutually reinforce each other is where we see the greatest impact.
Okay, I guess we more or less covered now all the topics in terms of trends, except for maybe what's the next hot thing up and coming in terms of platforms, right. Or what do you think? What should brands or be aware of or try and test? What's out there? What do you think?
Well, of course, if I could predict that accurately, I would be very rich. But I will tell you, there's some interesting things that I'm seeing that I think is worth looking at. The advent of machine learning and artificial intelligence is driving a lot of really much more sophisticated ability to be able to interact with consumers in two ways: chatbots, and also with voice-activated devices. These so-called they're called smart virtual personal assistants, the SVPA, which doesn't roll off the tongue, but you will hear that more and more. And by those I mean the Amazon Echo, which I understand was just introduced in Germany today, Google Home, Apple's Siri. This idea that through this kind of artificial intelligence, you can have a voice experience, a one-to-one experience with the device. I got my first Amazon Echo not so much because I felt I wanted it or needed it, just because of the industry I'm in. I felt, well, I really need to understand it better, and the best way to understand any platform is to use it. And by the way, I would suggest to everybody, really deeply learn every platform. Don't think Snapchat's not for you, whatever age you are. You need to be on Snapchat and everything else. So I got my Amazon Echo, and within 2 weeks, we became so addicted to it that we bought 3 more. And I now have Amazon Echoes in 4 different places in my house. And it is one of those truly, for me, maybe not for everybody, one of those moments where a device has become completely indispensable, whereas before I had it, I didn't even know I needed it.
Well, wait, because, I mean, you might know we Germans are always very critical. And as we look at Amazon and some of the critics already in the German media landscape, they're already referring to all the things that might not be working properly. Yeah. So how is that beneficial to you?
Well, I'll just tell you how it's beneficial to me personally. First of all, my husband hooked it up with all the lights in our house. So I can, as I'm going upstairs, I say, Alexa, turn on my bedroom lights. As we're leaving the house, we say, Alexa, turn off all the lights in the house. Boom, it's done. So I feel like I'm doing a commercial for Amazon Echo. I can say, Alexa, play my, Pandora or Spotify station for, Adele, picking on Adele since she won the Grammy last night. Or, what's the weather? And, without stopping, without picking up my device and having to type things in, it's tremendous. And you can do fun things. I just learned, I haven't tried this yet. You can tell Alexa a fragment of a lyric, but you don't know what the song is, and Alexa will play the song. So I haven't tried that. I'm going to try that at home. So, but I think we haven't really figured out what the true potential is, because it's still just the beginning, and what the opportunities are for brands. I mean, clearly e-commerce is going to be an opportunity, but what are the other opportunities? I mean, aside from commercials, which is which ultimately is going to be an intrusive experience, what are the brand integrations that will provide people utility in their homes via voice activation? I don't really know, but I'm really excited about experimenting with that. The same thing with chatbots on messaging platforms. Messaging platforms have seen explosive growth, and whether it's WhatsApp or Messenger, or others, but we've really only seen the beginning of what the potential is. And if you look to China and how people are using WeChat basically for everything, the question that we're all asking ourselves is that where, is that going to be replicated in the West? And what are the opportunities there also for brands, whether it's e-commerce, for messaging, for content, for integration, for customer service, for all manner of things. So those are 2 that I'm looking at.
And we sure look at them as well.
Yeah.
So one question in terms of Alexa, did you order anything yet with her?
I haven't. No, I haven't yet. But I'm going to try it for no other reason than I want to experiment with it. But like I said, I didn't know I needed Alexa until she arrived. She walked into my home. That sounds like a romance. But so I know that maybe sounds very strange, but. I think it's pretty powerful technology. And by the way, by Alexa, Google Home, is a similar experience, all of the other ones.
Yeah. So I guess what I heard before as well is that once the voice devices are much easier for everybody to use rather than typing something somewhere, and once they understand us properly, I guess we will see some growth in this area in communication as well.
It does raise for some people, of course, privacy concerns. You have these devices that are listening in your home, all manner of the day and night. So
definitely a question in Germany. There will be questions.
Yeah, right, everywhere. But in Germany, no doubt.
Yeah. So, Vivian, I think we touched a lot of topics, from platforms to publisher to branded content. We looked even at some upcoming trends. I think what I hear is one thing is we should stay curious and test a lot of things, even so we might not see that they be of use today. We might come up with some really good and interesting ideas to communicate with our target group. And the other thing I thought, what I understood is that you really say, the target group first, analyze where they are, make sure it's very specific where you communicate in the channels,
right?
Put paid behind it, and then drive it to wherever you have an archive.
Measure and optimize,
measure and optimize.
Yeah.
I think that is really, in general, there's a big demand when it comes talking to companies, brands, that they want to see the proof of where their money is going to.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all. Dankeschön fürs Zuschauen. Wer den ein oder anderen Trend gerne mit uns vertiefen möchte und rausbekommen möchte, was heißt das jetzt eigentlich für mich als Unternehmen oder für mich als Brand, der kann sich jederzeit gerne an mich wenden. Und wir freuen uns auf jeden Fall, diese Diskussion zu vertiefen, weil Vivian und ich, also wir könnten hier auf jeden Fall tagelang, we could talk days about that, the two of us, right? Okay, so vielen Dank fürs Zuhören und bis zur nächsten Inspirational Conversation. Tschüss und vielen Dank.
Bye.